in the sprawling Gothic grandeur of the 41st millennium, where humanity clings to survival in a galaxy of unimaginable horrors. History is not merely a record of the past, it is a weapon, it is a shield. It is a carefully constructed narrative of heroes and traitors, of glorious victories and bitter defeats, carved into the very bones of the galaxy. The Imperium of Man is built upon these stories, upon the legends of the God Emperor and his 20 demigod sons, the Primarchs. We know their names, we recite their deeds, we remember the 9 who stayed loyal, and the 9 who betrayed humanity, plunging the galaxy into the fires of the Horus Heresy. From the noble Lionel Johnson, first among equals, to the tragic figure of Horus Lupercal, the warmaster who fell to darkness, their sagas are etched into the very soul of the Imperium. Robuta Guilliman, the avenging sun, Sanguinius, the great angel, Leman Russ, the Wolf King, Rogal Dorn, the Praetorian of terror. Their names echo through 10,000 years of war and sacrifice. But there were not 18 sons, there were 20. Travel to the heart of the Imperium, to the throne world of terror itself. Deep within the sanctums of the Imperial Palace, a fortress city that covers a continent, stands the Investiary, a silent, hallowed hall where the demigod sons of the Emperor were once honored. Here, 20 plinths of Auslight stand in a solemn ring, each meant to hold the statue of a Primarch. 18 of these plinths bear their burdens, monuments to glory and shame alike. But 2 of them are empty. Plinths 2 and 11 have been vacant for a very, very long time. Their statues are gone, their records have been expunged, their names have been scoured from history with a terrifying finality. Even the Traitor Primarchs, those who sided with Horus and damned the galaxy to eternal war, are remembered. Their names are curses, their deeds cautionary tales. But the 2nd and 11th, they are nothing. They are less than nothing. They are a void where history should be. This is the ultimate mystery of the Great Crusade, a secret so profound that even 10,000 years later, it remains shrouded in a silence enforced by fear and authority. What happened to the 2 lost Primarchs? What unspeakable tragedy or unforgivable crime led to their complete and utter erasure from a history already filled with every conceivable horror? This is the story of the Forgotten and the Purged, the story of the 2nd and 11th Legions, and it is a story that the Imperium itself has tried, with all its terrible might, to ensure you never hear. To unravel this mystery, we must become historical detectives, sifting through the fragments of lore left behind, like shards of broken glass from a shattered stained glass window. The official policy of erasure is known as an Edict of Obliteration, or Damnatio Memoriae. It is the Imperium's most severe punishment, reserved for those whose very memory is a threat. The fact that the erasure of the 2nd and 11th was so successful tells us that their crime, or their fate, was of an entirely different magnitude than even that of the arch-traitor Horus. Think about that for a moment. Horus Lupercal, the favoured son, led half the legions in a war that killed billions, shattered the Emperor, and doomed humanity to a slow, grinding death. And yet, we remember his name, we study his fall, we analyse his motivations. But the 2nd and 11th, their erasure was so complete that even the other Primarchs, demigods with perfect memories, struggled to recall them. This was not just punishment, this was unmaking. Our first clues come from the Primarchs themselves. Their words, often spoken in hushed tones or moments of great stress, betray a deep-seated trauma. At the triumph of Ulanor, a celebration of the Great Crusade's greatest victory, Magnus the Red turned to his brother, Mortarion, and remarked on the gathering of 9 Primarchs, something that had not happened since. But Mortarion cut him off, his voice a low growl.
I know well when it was, Magnus, and the Emperor forbade us to speak of it again. Do you disobey that command?
The Emperor himself forbade them to speak of it. This was not a matter of shame or grief left to the brothers to handle. This was a direct order from the master of mankind. The silence was enforced from the very top. In the halls of the Imperial Palace, the ever-vigilant Rogal Dorn, Primarch of the Imperial Fists, once looked upon the empty plinths and mused to himself.
The 2nd and 11th plinths had been vacant for a long time. No one ever spoke of those two absent brothers. Their separate tragedies had seemed like aberrations. Had they in fact been warnings that no one had heeded?
Warnings. And note the word, tragedies, plural. This was not a single event. This was two separate paths to oblivion, two different fates, two different sins, two different horrors. His brother, Ferrus Manus, Primarch of the Iron Hands, had a similar experience. Stumbling upon a hidden chamber with 20 statues of the Primarchs, their faces masked, he noted that the masks of two were split and almost destroyed. Not just removed, but violently marred, as if someone had taken a hammer to them in a fit of rage or grief. This fear of a shared flaw is most palpable in Sanguinius, the angelic Primarch of the Blood Angels. He harbored a terrible secret, the Red Thirst, a genetic flaw that drove his sons to madness and bloodlust. It was a curse that could turn his noble warriors into ravening beasts. When his brother Horus confronted him, urging him to seek the Emperor's help, Sanguinius's reaction was not one of hope, but of pure, visceral terror.
You know the reason. I will not be responsible for the erasure of the Blood Angels from Imperial history. I will not have a third empty plinth beneath the roof of the hegemon as my legion's only memorial.
A third empty plinth. The implication is chillingly clear. Sanguinius believed that a genetic flaw was the reason for his brother's disappearance. He feared that the Emperor's solution to the Red Thirst would not be a cure, but an execution. The same fear haunted Magnus the Red, Primarch of the Thousand Sons, whose legion was afflicted by the flesh change, a wave of uncontrolled mutations that twisted his sons into monsters. Both of these Primarchs looked at the empty plinths and saw their own potential future. Even the stoic Vulcan, Primarch of the Salamanders, spoke of the loss with a heavy heart. When troubled by the darkness he saw in his brother Conrad Kurz, the Night Haunter, he lamented the idea of reporting it, saying,
"None of us wants another sanction, another empty pillar in the great investuary, another brother's name excised from all record. It is shame enough to bear the grief for two."
Sanction, grief. These are not words used for traitors who are simply defeated. They speak of a deliberate, painful act of judgment. The Primarchs did not hate their lost brothers. They mourned them, they feared for them, and they feared becoming them. The timeline of this judgment is also crucial. We know from the novel The First Heretic that the erasure happened at least 43 years before the drop site massacre at Istvan V. When the word-bearers were publicly shamed by the Emperor for their religious worship, their Primarch Lorgar feared they would be cast alongside the brothers we no longer speak of. This places the event firmly within the era of the Great Crusade, long before Horus's rebellion. The Lost Primarchs were not casualties of the heresy, they were something else entirely. Looking deeper, we do have some hints of their personalities and their place in the order of discovery. The Primarch Fulgrim, in a moment of reflection, referred to the master of the Second Legion as his quiet, contemplative brother, suggesting a Primarch of thought and reason, not rash action. What could such a mind have done to warrant erasure? Furthermore, the official Horus Heresy timeline reveals that the second Primarch was discovered third in 821 M30, making him one of the first 8 found. The 11th Primarch, by contrast, was discovered 19th in 927 M30, the second to last before Alfarius. One was an old hand, a veteran of the early crusade. The other was a newcomer, barely integrated before his fall.
In the modern era of the Indomitus Crusade, more clues have surfaced. The Archmagus Belisarius Cawl, creator of the Primaris Marines, revealed to a resurrected Rabute Guilliman that he possessed the gene seed of all 20 legions, including the 2nd and 11th. He had even created Primaris Marines from their stock. When Guilliman furiously forbade their use, Cawl's proxy, the Cawl Inferior, argued,
"The warriors were not at fault. The science is not at fault. Their Primarchs were."
This confirms two things. The flaw was with the Primarchs, not their sons, and their genetic legacy survives, locked away in a vault, a testament to a crime the Imperium refuses to name. This corroborates what Malcador the Sigillite had revealed. In the short story, The Chamber at the End of Memory, Rogal Dorn discovers a hidden tower containing the sealed quarters of his lost brothers. The rooms are described as only a tomb. Malcador appears and, for a fleeting moment, lifts the psychic veil he had placed on Dorn's mind. What Dorn sees is so terrible that he agrees it must remain hidden. The memory fades, but the certainty remains. He declares,
"What came to pass could overshadow everything. The raw, hateful truth is clear to me. If they were here with us now, this war would already have been lost."
Lost. Not just more difficult, not a setback. Lost. This single statement reframes the entire mystery. The presence of the two Lost Primarchs during the Horus Heresy would not have helped the Loyalist cause. It would have guaranteed its destruction. This wasn't just a case of two more legions falling to chaos. The truth, it seems, is something far, far worse. Malcador also reveals another critical piece of the puzzle. The legionaries of the 2nd and 11th were not destroyed with their Primarchs. At the behest of Dorn and Robute Guilliman, their memories were wiped, and they were folded into other legions. Malcador describes them as having been attuned to new circumstances. This is supported by the long-standing rumor that the Ultramarines' legions swelled to an unprecedented size around the time the two legions were forgotten. The sons were given a second chance. Their fathers were not. Even the physical records of the time bear the scars of this erasure. In the archives of the Horus Heresy, the very names of the legions and their Primarchs are redacted with thick black lines. But even these redactions tell a story. The length of the black mark hiding the 2nd Legion's name is long, almost as long as Emperor's children, while the 11th Legion's name is shorter, closer to Thousand Sons. The name of the 2nd Legion's Primarch is a short redaction, suggesting a single name like Alfarius. The 11th's is longer, hinting at a title or a full name, like Magnus the Red. These are the ghosts of names, outlines in the dark. Malcador the Sigillite, the Emperor's right hand, was the architect of this great forgetting. In his obsessive quest to preserve humanity's history, he also became its most ruthless editor. He and an agent once visited the dungeons beneath the Imperial Palace, passing a massive sealed door. On it were the symbols of the legions, but two had been violently scratched out. When pressed, Malcador simply said that no one went into that room anymore. The original sin, locked away behind a desecrated door. And what of the legions themselves? The Space Wolves, the Emperor's designated executioners, carry the memory of this grim duty. When Leman Russ was tasked with sanctioning Magnus the Red, he was asked if fighting another legion was unprecedented. His answer was a sad laugh.
That? Hylda, no. That's not unprecedented.
There is one more clue, perhaps the most haunting of all. In the novel Fury of Magnus, the perpetual Olivia Sureka recalls meeting 5 Primarchs: Horus, Guilliman, Corvus Corax, Magnus, and one whose name she had sworn never to speak. This is not a Primarch who was forgotten. This is a Primarch whose name is actively forbidden. Even those who remember are bound to silence. So, The crime was the Primarchs, and the Primarchs alone. Their sons were granted a mercy, a second chance, their identities erased and rewritten. The mystery deepens. What could a Primarch do that was so terrible their sons had to be spared, yet their own memory had to be annihilated to save the Imperium from a guaranteed defeat? We have the whispers, the echoes, the shadows on the wall. Now, we must step into the realm of theory and explore the cataclysms that might have forced the Emperor to commit the unthinkable, to unmake his own sons. With the canonical clues laid bare, we enter the realm of speculation. For 10,000 years, scholars and heretics alike have whispered theories, trying to piece together the puzzle of the two lost sons. Each theory opens a new door into the dark heart of the Imperium's past, a past the Emperor himself sought to bury. Let us examine the most compelling of these theories, weighing the evidence for and against each. Theory 1. The Rangdan Xenocides. Before the Horus Heresy, the Great Crusade faced its darkest hour, a conflict so devastating it is barely a footnote in the censored histories of the Imperium. A Xenos empire of unimaginable power, known as the Rangda, rose in the galactic north. The Rangdan Xenocides were a series of wars so brutal, so costly, that they rivaled even the heresy. The Imperium suffered losses that would not be exceeded until the Siege of Terra itself. Entire expeditionary fleets were annihilated. Dozens of Titan legions were lost. The Emperor himself was forced to take to the field, a measure of last resort, and according to heavily redacted records, entire Space Marine legions were destroyed. The Horus Heresy Book 7. Inferno states that entire Space Marine legions, redacted section, had been lost to the Imperium during this conflict. We know from a rare, accidentally released document, the Imperial Infantryman's uplifting primer, that both the 2nd and 11th Legions fought in this meat grinder. The theory is simple and brutal. One or both of the lost legions were utterly annihilated in the fighting. But simple annihilation doesn't explain the need for a total memory wipe. The Thunder Warriors were destroyed, and their memory was simply allowed to fade. So, the theory evolves. What if they weren't just destroyed? What if they were compromised? The Rangda were known for their horrific mind control technologies, their ability to turn flesh and machine against their masters. Perhaps one of the Primarchs and his entire legion fell under the sway of this Xenos power, a demigod son of the Emperor turned into a puppet for a hostile alien empire. The shame, the strategic vulnerability, would have been absolute. To prevent this technology from ever being known, to prevent the morale of the nascent Imperium from shattering, the Emperor may have had no choice but to erase them completely. Recent lore supports this. In the novel The Wolf Time, members of the Adeptus Custodes discuss the history of the 10,000 with the 11th Legion, implying the Custodes themselves were involved in whatever happened. One custodian notes that loyalty to the Emperor can be directed to ill ends by manipulation and lies, suggesting the 11th Legion may have been unwittingly manipulated into betraying the Emperor. The Space Wolves, the Emperor's executioners, would have been dispatched to carry out the grim sentence, a task Leman Russ himself admitted was not unprecedented. Theory 2. The unstable gene seed. This is the fear that haunted Sanguinius and Magnus. The Primarchs were marvels of genetic engineering, but they were not perfect. Each carried a fragment of the Emperor's own soul, a shard of divinity that made them more than human. But what if that fragment was corrupted? What if the gene seed of the 2nd or 11th Primarch was fundamentally flawed? What if it led to uncontrollable, horrific mutations? A legion of monsters, their forms twisting into abominations, their minds lost to madness. This wouldn't be a rebellion. It would be a plague, a biological time bomb at the heart of the Emperor's grand design. If word got out that the Emperor's own sons could decay into monstrosities, faith in the entire Space Marine project would crumble. The other legions might look at their own minor flaws and wonder when their time would come. The Emperor, the master geneticist, would have been forced to act like a surgeon excising a cancer. The Legion would be purged, the Primarch put down, and the records sealed to prevent a pandemic of fear. The fact that their gene seed still exists in Cole's vault suggests the flaw was perhaps not in the genetics themselves, but in how they reacted with their Primarch, a unique and catastrophic failure. The Primarch was the catalyst for the disaster, and removing him allowed the gene seed to stabilize. This would explain why the sons were spared. They were not inherently flawed, only their father was. Theory 3. A betrayal before the betrayal. Dorn's words echo in our minds. If they were here with us now, this war would already have been lost. This suggests they would have sided with Horus. But what if their sin wasn't falling to chaos? What if they simply disagreed? What if one of the Lost Primarchs, after being rediscovered, looked at the Great Crusade, at the demand for total compliance, at the burning of libraries and the destruction of cultures, and said, no? What if he believed in a different path for humanity, one that didn't involve a secular, atheistic dictatorship enforced by legions of transhuman soldiers? Perhaps one of them encountered a civilization of peaceful Xenos and refused to exterminate them, or saw the hypocrisy in the imperial truth. This would be a betrayal not of the Emperor's person, but of his entire ideology. A philosophical rebellion is, in many ways, more dangerous than a military one. It plants a seed of doubt. It suggests there is an alternative. For an empire built on absolute ideological unity, such a heresy could not be tolerated. This Primarch wouldn't have been a monster or a puppet. He would have been a rival, and the Emperor tolerates no rivals. His erasure would be a stark message to the other Primarchs: toe the line, or you will cease to exist. The short story The Last Council provides a tantalizing clue. In it, Horus, Alpharius, and Jagatai Khan confront Malcador as he is about to destroy a statue of a lost Primarch. Horus tries to speak the Primarch's name and manages to utter Mal-Ol before Malcador psychically strangles him. Malcador felt the old, familiar rage upon hearing this. The name is never completed, leaving us to wonder, was Horus trying to say Malcador, or was he trying to say something else entirely? Theory 4. A threat beyond chaos. There is one more theory, whispered only in the darkest corners of the lore. What if the Lost Primarchs didn't fall to chaos, or Xenos, or their own flaws? What if they encountered something else, something older, something stranger? The second Primarch is said to have led an expedition to the Imga monolith, a mysterious structure in the eastern fringe that predates even the Necrons. What did he find there? What found him? The novel Penitent introduces the concept of the Enuncia, a language of pure creation that can reshape reality. What if one of the Primarchs discovered a truth so fundamental, so reality-altering, that his very existence became a threat to the fabric of the universe? And then there is the being known as Subject 11, is held in the deepest vaults of the Imperial Palace. Is this the 11th Primarch himself, imprisoned for eternity? Or something that was once the 11th Primarch, transformed into something so terrible it cannot be killed, only contained? These theories are compelling, but they all circle a central, terrifying point. The truth had to be something that could unravel the Imperium in a way the Horus Heresy could not. The heresy was a civil war, brother against brother. It was a tragedy of loyalty and ambition, fueled by the insidious whispers of chaos. But the Imperium survived it, scarred and broken, but intact. The story of the Lost Primarchs, however, was a truth so dangerous it had to be unwritten from reality. This brings us to the most staggering implication of all. What if the threat they fell to, or the crime they committed, was something worse than chaos? For millennia, we have been taught that chaos is the ultimate enemy, the great other, the primordial annihilator. But the galaxy is vast, and its horrors are manifold. The Rangdan Xenocides proved that there are Xenos empires capable of bringing the Imperium to its knees. And then there is the final, most terrible possibility, hinted at by Rogal Dorn's vision. The idea that the problem wasn't an outside force, but an inside one. The flaw wasn't in their loyalty or their genes, but in their very nature. What if the two Lost Primarchs embodied aspects of the Emperor that he himself had to repress? What if they were a reflection of a darkness within the Master of Mankind? A darkness so profound that to let it exist in his sons would have been to admit his own potential for damnation. Robert Guilliman himself reflects on his father's legacy.
I was one of 20. 2 failed. Half the rest turned on my father. The Emperor is not infallible, nor am I.
He does not say they betrayed. He says they failed. A different word, a different sin. A failure implies something went wrong, not that they chose to do wrong. It implies tragedy, not treachery. This is the secret that could truly shatter the Imperium. Not just the knowledge of a failed son, but the knowledge that the God Emperor himself is flawed, that his grand design was imperfect from the very beginning. The knowledge that the line between savior and tyrant, between God and monster, is terrifyingly thin. This is why the truth remains hidden. It's not just about covering up a military defeat or a genetic mistake. It's about protecting the foundational lie upon which the entire Imperium is built. The infallibility of the Emperor. If that lie were to unravel, the faith of trillions would shatter. The endless wars, the constant sacrifice, the brutal oppression, all of it would be for nothing. The Imperium would not just fall, it would cease to have ever had a purpose.
And so, the plinths remain empty. The records remain sealed. The names of the 2nd and 11th Primarchs remain unspoken, lost to the shadows of history. Their story is a void, a hole in the heart of the Imperium's grand narrative. On Macragge, in the days before the heresy, Robert Guilliman built a great table with 21 chairs, one for each of his brothers and one for their father. 2 of the pennants above those chairs were plain, undyed cloth. When the lion asked why, Guilliman replied, "Yet their absence must be marked. Places must be left for them. That is simply honor. Honor, even for the forgotten, even for the purged."
Perhaps it is better that way. In a galaxy defined by war and faith, some truths are too dangerous to know. The mystery of the Lost Primarchs is more than just a historical curiosity. It is a testament to the scale of the sacrifices made, the compromises brokered, and the terrible secrets buried to forge the Imperium of man. They are the ghosts in the machine, the silent warning that even demigods can fall, and that some histories are so terrible, they are better off forgotten. For their story is not one of glory or honor. It is a story of what the Imperium is willing to do to survive, and the price of knowing what lies buried in the dark. The empty plinths stand as a monument to that price, and they will stand, silent and accusing, until the stars themselves burn out.